Beneath a veil of swirling mist and starless sky, the rugged pinnacles of the Himalayas loomed like silent sentinels against the night. A bone-chilling wind swept across the rocky outcrops, carrying shards of ice that grated against stone as though the mountains themselves were grinding their teeth. Yet, in this frozen expanse, one presence moved with uncanny grace. A lone snow leopard, her silver-flecked pelt nearly invisible against the pale granite, prowling the narrow ridge with the poise of a phantom. Each step was measured and deliberate. Her padded paws pressed softly into the dusting of fresh snow, leaving faint, crescent-shaped prints that seemed to vanish almost as quickly as they appeared. Muscles beneath her tawny flanks coiled and flexed with every silent shift of weight, ready to spring at a moment's notice. High above her, the wind-tossed banners of Himalayan prayer flags snapped in the gale, their faded prayers flapping like distant echoes of a world far below. The air tasted of raw stone and frost, and the leopard inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring to catch any hint of movement in the darkness. Though the moon lay hidden behind a bank of rolling clouds, the leopard's eyes glowed faintly, pale amber beacons tuned to pick out the slightest disturbance in the gloom. She paused at a rocky ledge overlooking a narrow gorge, ears swiveling to catch the faintest scrape of gravel or rustle of fur. Somewhere down in those shadowed depths, small mountain goats and pika scurried, their beating hearts promising life's sustenance. But tonight, her purpose lay not in hunt, but in vigilance. For not far from this ridge, her youngest cub lay wounded, trapped beneath a fallen boulder, a perilous plight no mother could ignore. Instinct drove her upward, guiding each step over shattered scree and through fields of jagged shale. The trek was arduous. In places, she had to swing her heavy tail for balance. In others, she pressed her body flat against the cliff face to skirt sheer drops. The storm-tossed wind clawed at her whiskers, yet she pressed on, driven by a fierce maternal determination. At last, she paused on a narrow shelf, just wide enough for her lithe frame. Below, flickers of lamplit torchlight, poachers' lanterns, danced among the rocks, their shadows picked clean by long rifled guns. The leopard's muscles tightened at the sight. She sensed the danger closing in on her cub. Heart pounding beneath her chest, she let out a low, resonant growl that rippled through the night air, a warning to those who dared trespass in her domain, and a secret call to allies who might heed her urgent plea for aid. A breath of frozen air slid down the mountainside as the snow leopard pressed her body flat against the wind-scoured rock. Though her low, resonant growl had carried through the gorge, she heard no reply, only the howl of the gale and the distant crash of shifting ice. Still, something compelled her to venture farther along the ledge. Each step was cautious, every sense straining for the faintest hint of her cub's plight. Ahead, the snow lay strangely undisturbed, except for a single line of minuscule paw prints, barely larger than her own claw marks. They trailed away from the safety of her den toward a narrow ravine slick with frost. The prints were fresh, the spacing uneven, as if the little one had faltered with pain. Heat flared in the mother's chest, and her muscles tensed beneath her thick coat. She leaned forward and inhaled. There was no whimper, no desperate cry, only the hollow whisper of her cub's tracking prints, crunching in the crusted snow. She followed the trail, sliding past jutting boulders and ducking beneath overhangs festooned with icicles. With each movement, the wind threatened to erase those precious tracks, yet the cub's faint scent, sweet with the tang of blood, lingered in her nostrils. Somewhere below, a heavy slab of stone must have shifted, trapping the cub in a crevice too narrow for her slender frame. The idea of her child pinned and helpless drove adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she crept around a frost-lined corner, she spied the first sign of disaster, a smear of orange-gold fur on a fragmented rock, matted with crimson. Her heart thundered. She crouched and studied every detail. Tiny silver claws gouged the stone where her cub had struggled, and a fractured boulder leaned precariously overhead. The moon, still hidden behind roiling clouds, offered no light, only the merciless dark. Summoning every scrap of courage, she let out a short, sharp trill. a call reserved for direst emergencies. It echoed and reverberated off the cliffs, a summons for help more urgent than any solitary growl. The chill in the air seemed to freeze for a heartbeat, then the world swallowed her cry. But she did not falter. Steeling herself against the cold and the growing dread, she began her careful descent toward the ravine, every sinew coiled, every claw poised to claw and pry at stone, determined to reach her wounded cub before dawn's first light. The ridge beneath her paws shuddered as she crept closer to the ravine's lip. Moonlight, still veiled by roiling clouds, cast the world in shifting grays, and every movement sent tiny avalanches of snow skittering down the rocky slope. As she inched over an outcropping of frost-glazed shale, her heart seized. There, wedged between two jagged boulders, lay her cub. The little one's golden fawn fur was streaked with fresh crimson, and each shallow breath came in ragged wheezes. One slender forepaw was pinned so tightly that its tiny claws scraped futilely against the stone's unforgiving surface. The cub's wide eyes, so like her own, fluttered open at her approach, shining with pain and disbelief. A sharp cry escaped its throat, echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. Rage and desperation rolled through her like a storm surge. She lunged forward and pressed her maw against the smaller boulder, teeth gripped firm, but the stone would not budge. She reared back and brought both powerful forepaws down in a hammer-like strike, claws raking at the rock's edge. Cracks splintered across its surface, but it held fast. With each unsuccessful blow, her muscles trembled with exhaustion, and she realized brute force alone would not free her cub. Beneath the boulder, the cub's soft whimpers grew weaker, and her breath caught in her throat. Snow tumbled from the ledge above, sending a nearby slab of ice clattering into the ravine with a thunderous clang. The echo sounded like gunfire in her ears, and somewhere in that roar, she thought she heard the faint murmur of human voices. Poachers, alerted perhaps by the sound of her emergency trill, were closing in. Panic sharpened her senses. She pressed her cheek to her cub's trembling body, inhaling the scent of fear and blood. Fragments of razor-sharp rock edged closer to the cub's flanks each time another sheet of ice fell. Time was slipping away. As the wind howled its challenge, she lifted her head and let loose a piercing, mournful wail, a call honed by centuries of survival instincts. The sound ripped through the narrow gorge, carrying on the air currents like a beacon of distress. Then, almost instantly, the air shifted. Far above, where the cliff face met sky, a pair of flickering orange lights appeared, lanterns borne by a second snow leopard, summoned by that secret signal. The mother felt a surge of hope, even as the ground beneath her trembled once more. With renewed determination, she redoubled her efforts to hold off the shifting stones until help arrived. Every sinew tensed, every nerve alight with the fierce promise she would not let her cub suffer another heartbeat alone. The wind had eased into a low, mournful whistle by the time the snow leopard drew herself back from the edge of the ravine. Above her, a ragged shroud of clouds parted just enough to reveal a slender sliver of moon, its pale light filtering down in fractured beams. The jagged cliff walls glowed faintly, and the air seemed to hold its breath. With her cub trapped and the boulder unmoved by claw or tooth, she knew brute strength alone would not save him. Instead, she summoned an instinct older than the mountains themselves, a sound so rare it was spoken of only in whispered legends among her kind. She crouched low, forepaws splayed on the frost-hard stone, and inhaled deeply. Her lungs filled with the icy Himalayan air, and the ache of exhaustion receded as she focused every sinew on the call she must transmit. Then, with a single resonant exhalation, she unleashed a deep, rolling trill, half growl, half song, at once urgent and hauntingly beautiful. The note vibrated through the granite canyon like a ringing bell, reverberating against the cliff faces in widening arcs of sound. Loose scree danced in miniature avalanches, and a pair of golden eyes glinted in a distant crevice, drawn by that unmistakable signal. As the echoes subsided, the snow leopard allowed herself a moment's pause, chest heaving, ears pricked for response. The night air grew electric, shimmering with anticipation. Minutes stretched into eternity until, far above on a narrow ledge, 2 lantern lights appeared, small beacons bobbing in the darkness. The summoning call had reached the ears of an ally, a large, silver-frosted male whose deep loyalty to the female had been forged in years of shared territory patrols. With cautious, deliberate strides, he descended toward her position, each footfall sure and silent. In that instant, mother and savior locked eyes across the void, bound by the secret language of their species and a single purpose: to free the cub and defy the silent perils lurking in the Himalayan night. High atop a narrow ledge, the silver-frosted male stood motionless, his amber eyes fixed on the canyon floor below. The deep, rolling trill of the female still echoed in his ears, a summons he had answered without hesitation. Now, lantern light in paw, he began his careful descent. Each step was a study in balance. One misstep on the slick, ice-crusted rock would send him plummeting into the ravine. He paused only once, when a jagged overhang blocked his path. With a powerful flex of his shoulder, he pressed his broad chest against the ice-encrusted slab, loosened by the female's earlier assaults, and nudged it aside with a rumbling grunt. Frost rained down, revealing a narrower but passable route. Without breaking stride, he continued downward, each clawed paw print marking the rescue mission he dared not fail. Below, the mother hummed a softer trill, a note of relief that carried through the night. The cub's faint, ragged cries cut through her urgency, and she pressed herself flat against the boulder, urging it upward with all her dwindling strength. When at last the male's massive frame rounded the last bend, the canyon seemed to hold its breath. "Here," she exhaled in a low growl, nodding toward the trapped cub. He saw the tiny tuft of golden fawn fur and the streak of crimson that stained the rock's edge. Without hesitation, he lowered his broad head under the overhanging boulder. His muzzle pressed firmly against the rough stone, and he lifted with the power of coiled springs, muscles rippling beneath his thick coat. The boulder groaned in protest, but shifted enough for the cub's slender leg to slip free. The cub let out a surprised yelp as the weight above it lightened. The female darted forward, nuzzling her cub's side, her whiskers brushing away the grit that clung to his fur. While the mother comforted their youngster, the male gave one more heave, using his hindquarters as an anchor. With a final crack, the boulder tipped away completely, revealing the cub's curled body, trembling but alive. For a heartbeat, all remained still. 3 silhouettes huddled beneath the fractured moonlight, muscles still taut, breaths ragged with exertion. Then, the cub staggered to its paws and stumbled into the female's warm flank. She wrapped her tail around him, and he pressed his head against her belly, drawing strength from her steady heartbeat. The male watched for any sign of danger. Poacher lanterns flickered distantly, but none dared approach this fortress of fur and tooth. Satisfied, he exhaled a soft rumble, as if offering reassurance, then turned toward a sheltered nook just above the ravine. There, he and the female would groom their cub, tend to his wounds, and plan their retreat before the dawn's first light touched the mountain peaks. In the hush that followed, the 3 snow leopards lingered side by side, a family united by the secret call of the night, by strength and cunning, and by a bond that no boulder or poacher could sever. As the first hints of pale pink light crept over the eastern horizon, the rescued cub huddled close between its parents in a sheltered alcove high above the ravine. The entrance to this small cave was no larger than a person's doorway, shielded by a ragged curtain of icy stalactites and boulders that the male had nudged aside on his way down. Inside, the rock walls radiated the faint warmth they had absorbed from the sun days before, offering a momentary refuge from the biting Himalayan chill. The mother curled her body around her cub, her flank rising and falling in a steady rhythm that soothed his trembling frame. She licked each wound with tender precision, soft pink tongue tracing the shallow scratches and broken fur where the stone had scraped him. Each careful stroke cleaned away grit and dried blood, and her low, rumbling hum carried an instinctive lullaby born of millennia of maternal care. The cub closed its eyes against the rough edges of rock, soothed by the familiar cadence of its mother's heartbeat. The male stationed himself at the mouth of the alcove, amber eyes scanning the jagged landscape. His silhouette was broad and stoic against the rising dawn, fur silvered by the last of last night's frost. Every so often he turned his head to check on the mother and cub, then resumed his watch, ears twitching at the slightest crack of ice or distant call of a mountain bird. In his silent vigil, he stood as both guardian and herald of safety, ensuring no poacher nor predator would breach this hidden refuge. Inside, the mother gathered small tufts of downy fur from beneath her limbs and arranged them into a makeshift bed for her cub. The soft nest acted like an insulator, trapping precious body heat. The cub nuzzled into the fur pile, legs folding beneath him as his eyes fluttered closed. With a final grooming lick, the mother settled herself so that her warmth radiated evenly through their shared den. Beyond the cave entrance, the world awoke to a quiet symphony. Distant avalanches clattering against far cliffs, horned sheep bleating on rocky ledges, and the soft thrumming of wind through high-altitude pines. Light spilled into the alcove in slender beams, illuminating motes of rock dust that danced like snowflakes in the air. The cub stirred, blinking up at the golden bars of morning. His first breaths of new day air were deeper, steadier, proof that the night's ordeal was behind him. As daylight strengthened, the family rose together. The mother stretched, her spine curving in a graceful arch, then nudged her cub gently toward the cave's mouth. The male slipped away to a higher perch, ready to lead the group across the ridge once more. With one last glance at their secret haven, the trio emerged into the rosy dawn, Paws treading fresh snow that glittered like crushed diamonds. Their silhouettes, three strong shapes framed against the rising sun, moved with the quiet purpose of survivors, and of a family bound by courage, cunning, and an unbreakable maternal bond. The sun now rode high above the Himalayan skyline, painting the snow-clad peaks in blazing gold and crimson. From their vantage point on the ridge, the family gazed out over a rolling sea of white, countless valleys and spires stretching into the haze. The cub, now steadier on its paws, blinked in the bright light, the sting of cold morning air, driving fresh vitality through its small frame. Its parents exchanged a look of quiet triumph. Against all odds, their secret signal had summoned aid, and their cub had survived to see this new day. With the male leading, they set off along a narrow ledge that wound around the mountain's flank. Each step was a lesson for the cub: how to feel for stable footholds on wind-scoured rock, how to keep its weight low when passing under overhangs, and how to pause and listen for hidden dangers: insects scuttling beneath stones, the distant rumble of shifting ice, or the hollow call of a snowcock echoing through the ravine. The mother frequently dipped her head to nuzzle the cub's ear, guiding its attention to subtle signs: the faintest scent of marmot trails, the soft imprint of goat tracks in the snow. As they journeyed, a warm breeze blew up from the lower valleys, carrying with it the scent of pine resin and distant rhododendron blooms. The snow began to thin, revealing patches of gray granite where sunlight pooled like liquid warmth. Here, the cub discovered the joy of stretching its claws into softer earth, testing its strength by leaping small chasms between rocks. Each small victory celebrated with a playful chirp that reverberated against the canyon walls. The parents watched with pride, tails twitching in rhythmic contentment. By mid-morning, they reached a hidden plateau, shaded by flagging pines and dotted with hardy juniper bushes. A crystal stream burbled through the grass, offering fresh water and a mirror-smooth surface, in which the cub caught its own reflection for the first time. The mother dipped her head to lap the cool liquid, and the cub eagerly followed, its wounds now cleaned and scabbed, the shape of strong bones beneath soft fur unmistakable. Around them, the air thrummed with life: chirruping snowfinches, the distant bleat of ibex, and the rustle of alpine grasses. Pausing at the stream's edge, the family huddled close. The mother's warm flank sheltered the cub from a sudden gust, while the male's broad form blocked the bright sun at their backs. In that moment, the world beyond, poachers, collapsing boulders, dark ravines, felt impossibly distant. Ahead lay new challenges: navigating the high passes in search of richer hunting grounds, teaching the cub the art of stealth and ensuring its hard-won strength would carry it through the lean seasons. Yet beneath the radiant sky, hope reigned supreme. As the trio rose and continued their ascent, the cub trotted between its parents, head held high, ears alert to every whisper of wind and bird call. Each paw beat marked the continuation of an ancient cycle, survival through vigilance, unity, and the unyielding bond of family. And when the cub, grown strong and cunning in seasons to come, would one day repeat its mother's secret call, the mountains would again answer, echoing a timeless promise that life, no matter how fragile, will find its way under the high Himalayan sun.